And I'm live with his Jeffness, Jeff, the SP Spouse Miller, who he's going to get back on track. He's going to be uploading videos and doing new videos soon when he gets his computer situation sorted out. So, the Duke of Temperament, maybe we could call him. I don't know.
Where'd that come from?
It came from Red Dwarf line where he had Lister, where he had he got like space mumps or something, and he had like a personified version of his paranoia and a personified version of his confidence. And the confidence was played by Craig Ferguson, and he would say things like, "You are the Duke of Deliciousness." So it's no. Pardon?
I said, I see.
Yes. So yeah, but back on track. So we're talking about this episode, Bad Medicine. So over to his Jeffness, and I will start showing some slides.
I wish I could see the pictures, but in order for me to read the thing, I have to switch over to.
Okay.
I always miss them, and then when I switch back, you don't have them on anymore.
Yeah, and what I'm going to do at the moment is instead of switching the images, folks, I'm going to pay attention to what Jeff is saying.
Well, you know, I figure we've recapped it or whatever, when we're talking about, we could still go through them. We could talk about those things. So either way, but anyway, okay. So brief description of the episode recap. Bad Medicine was written by David Simon, Tom Fontana, and Julie Martin, and directed by Kenneth Fink. Originally aired October 25th, 1996. And it was the fourth episode of season 5. Drug addicts all over Baltimore are dying from a batch of adulterated heroin sold by a dealer in competition with Luther Mahoney. After the dealer is found murdered, narcotics detective Terry Stivers works with Lewis and the homicide unit to build a conspiracy case against Mahoney and cut off the supply of bad drugs at the same time. The case falls apart when the only witness, Stivers' informant, is also killed. Of course, it was already a weak case at that point anyway, but Kellerman is put on desk duty after the entire arson unit becomes the target of a federal investigation for corruption. Pembleton fails his firearms test and begins taking his medication again, and Brody moves in with Bayless after Munch throws him out, but he didn't really. Brody said he was moving out, so.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, not very well written.
Yeah, and in fact,
well researched recap there.
And in fact, Munch was a little bit put out by that about Brody.
Yeah,
moving out, a little bit offended.
All right, so I'm going to read some of David B226 Morris's review, not the entire thing, for a couple of reasons. One, because it's kind of long, and last time, my thing cut out in the middle of it, and I read a bunch of stuff for nothing, and I don't want that to happen again. Should my audio go out? And two, because he's getting more and more spoilerish in some of these reviews, because we're getting into some stories now that have a significant impact for the show for quite a while into the next period of time. So he's writing these things with the assumption that the people reading it have all seen the entire series. So
he shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, I kind of have to edit some of these. Anyway, so he says, Homicide is a very dark show. You can't deal with death day in and day out and be happy about it. Murder is not fun. Of course, some people would disagree with him, but anyway. But few episodes of the series are as dark and depressing as Bad Medicine. Almost every character suffers some disappointment, and most are going through pain that will follow them for much of the season. We are witness to the true mortality of the narcotics business. 3 killings that will never be solved go on the board, and the musical pieces for the show just make the show seem truly disheartening. Yet despite all this, the show is as grimly fascinating and brilliant as ever. For starters, Pembleton is trying to pass the firing exam even though he has been off his medicine and even though it is clear that he's still just not ready to be back on the street. This becomes clear when Frank announces to G that his aim was true, but he failed on the reloads because of his problem with the word magazine. Despite that, he all but begs his lieutenant to get him back on the job. But G, loyal to Frank as he is, will not bend the rules this time. And then again, G has a much bigger problem to deal with. Kellerman is put under investigation by the FBI when he is accused by Matthew Rowland, the high-level slumlord we briefly met in Fire back in season 4, of taking bribes while he was in arson.
Is he the one that looks like that guy? You know, the guy that said that
I'm better than that guy if you want me to know.
Christopher Walken. Is he the one that looks like Christopher Walken, or is that a different guy?
I didn't think he looked like Walken, but maybe you did. I don't know.
Yeah, but it is that guy that I think looks like him that you think doesn't look like him.
Maybe.
Right. Okay.
I think I remember you maybe saying that, but I forgot who it was about, so it might have been Roland.
Okay.
Mike insists that he is innocent, but Homicide provides no independent verification of it. We are just asked to take his word for it. Kellerman, like Pimbleton, is put on administrative duty, which is bad enough, but a scarlet letter is put on his chest. The whispering and gossiping about Mike has already begun, and it doesn't help matters that his union lawyer advises him not to talk to anybody about it. The process that will eventually lead to the destruction... Okay, I can't read that part.
Yes, no, it sounded a bit spoilery.
Yeah, I got to skip that line. Okay. All this, and we haven't even gone out on the street yet. As we see in the teaser, people are overdosing on heroin left and right, but because they were obviously not murders, the detectives don't care until someone gets murdered. In this case, a minor drug lord named Bojack Reed, who has been responsible for the overdoses by lacing his packages of heroin with scopolamine. This is bad business, but what makes it worse is he was doing this on purpose to try and drive the competitor out of the market. Bad idea, especially when the business rival is Luther Mahoney. The Mahoney
I'll just say how he did that for the audience. What he did was Mahoney's drugs, they had like a 2 stars on, I think it was. And this competitor was trying to make it look like Mahoney was giving out bad drugs. So that is what pushed Mahoney to think, hang on a minute, now you're trying to discredit me. Now you're a marked man.
Yeah, and one thing that's not actually mentioned in his review here that I thought was a good detail is that the addict snitch Vernon Troy says that the word on the street being that the dope was killing people made hardcore addicts more likely to try to get it, not less likely, because they had this attitude of, I can handle it, and these other people couldn't. They think that it's like this supreme high that's killing people. So, anyway, the Mahoney saga begins in earnest with these murders. Adding to the mix is a new character, narcotics detective Terry Stivers. It's clear that she already has a history with Luther. He has even given her his pager number. Working in concert with Meldrick Lewis, her interest right now is getting the bad drugs off the street. Reed's murder complicates things, and they get even more complicated when her informant, an addict named Vernon Troy, has his name on the arrest warrant for Mahoney. Unfortunately, they then send him back on the street to get a fix, which is an example of bad planning when Luther ends up beating the rap. Troy then disappears, only to turn up a day later with a bullet in his head. Troy is the first bystander in the drug war to get killed. He won't be the last. All of these stories are dark and serious, yet they are not the reason this episode stays in the memory for me. The musical set pieces for Homicide are usually brilliant. In this episode, however, the singer is the gravelly voiced Tom Waits. If ever a man was meant to sing for the show, Waits is that man. His rendition of Cold, Cold Ground, accompanied by the wailing of a lone harmonica, over the montage of Stivers and Lewis drowning their sorrows at the waterfront, Bunch and Howard discovering Vernon Troy's body, and Pimbleton's return home is one of the most brilliant combinations of music and scene that I have ever seen on television. Never has Homicide made it more clear that a policeman's lot is not a happy one than in the last minutes of this episode. Some truly fine acting occurs in Bad Medicine. There is the usual high-caliber work of Andre Braugher, of course, as well as fine stuff by Reed Diamond. Eric Todd Dellums makes his first impact as Luther Mahoney. The smarminess and oiliness of his character really becomes clear, not to mention the underlying amusement with the charges he is being faced with. By the way, I'll just say, from behind-the-scenes stuff on the DVD, David Simon, who said when they had people pick out like their favorite scenes in Homicide, the production people, that scene, the interrogation scene with Luther Mahoney, was his choice. Of course, he wrote it. But basically, that's what they were doing, is that each one of them chose something that they came up with for the show, and that was his pick, was that scene from this episode. In his scene with Stivers and Lewis, he does a combo flirtation discussion, which must be seen to be believed. Equally impressive is jittery, anxiety-prone Achille Prince's work as the doomed Vernon Troy. Of all the drug-taking characters on Homicide, this is perhaps the most memorable one. For all the darkness on this show, there are some light moments. Most of them are tied to Brody. The videographer opts to move out of Munch's apartment and moves in with Bayless. We get a rare look at him off the job as we see him in a large purple bathrobe watching Mighty Mouse. It's pretty obvious this isn't going to work out for long. But Bad Medicine is otherwise a very dark episode, not just because of the ODs, 3 killings, or the music. Yeah, I can't read that part. Okay. For that reason, you can't help but look with this episode with a sense of dread. My score 9. Well, the gist of it is he says that the events of this episode were going to have future ramifications. So that's not a super spoiler in terms of, I'd already mentioned that sort of being the case. So anyway, that's what he said. Ben, what's your first impressions?
My first impressions are that, and this is how I want the dialogue to be, where it's not dull, but it's not overwritten. It's entertaining. It's realistic, and characters are saying lines that you can believe that would come out of their heads. So the dialogue was good for all of those reasons.
Yeah. When you see teleplay by David Simon in the credits, you're usually going to have that result.
And it's sort of,
you see, to remind the audience, in case anyone doesn't remember, he's the one who wrote Homicide: A Year on the Killing Streets, the book that the entire show is based on.
and we can see now why he went on to produce The Wire, that this was a guy with talent for dialogue and the ability to know his subject in super depth because, of his work as what was he, a crime reporter? And then he did that undercover thing for the book. So
yeah, for the Baltimore Sun. Yeah.
So, but generally, Jeff, what do you think of the dialogue in this episode compared to other seasons? And is this the kind of dialogue that you like?
Yeah, and I think when I said a while back that I thought that in some complaints you'd had in season 4 time about the dialogue, I said that I thought this in season 5 it improved, and I think probably largely due to the influence of David Simon. So you had the combination effect of his work sort of lending a certain greater amount of authenticity to the show, but you also had the network interfering in terms of some of the storylines. So you have what you end up with is an interesting mix where you have the network making some dictations that they had to deal with and come up with things to do, but then you also had somebody, making sure that within what they were being forced to do, they tried to make the most of it in terms of making it as realistic as they could under the circumstances they were given. And David Simon created the character of Luther Mahoney, not as a direct basis on a particular drug dealer, but he basically sort of a microcosm, or that's probably not the right word, but an amalgamation, is that the word, where you combine different people?
Yeah.
So the people that he knew of as far as being sort of drug lord types in his research in Baltimore, Luther Mahoney was sort of an amalgamation of more than one of those.
And an analogy is sometimes when novels turned into films, sometimes characters are combined into one. But yeah, what I think is that with this style of dialogue, when it's a grim storyline, it just puts a degree of separation away from reality. Because the dialogue is realistic, but it's just a little bit different from reality, where it doesn't seem as quite as grim, because there is this thing that it's slightly where the dialogue is heightened. I don't know whether it's just me, but I see it as this is slightly heightened, so it's sort of less gritty to me. Whereas when they write it where it sounds absolutely real, then it's almost like too real for me. So
Yeah, one thing I would say is, in just terms of my gut feeling while watching the episode again, an episode, like Hostage and even Prison Riot had more actual action, and so there was sort of this kind of, the drum beats, in the background is just trying to sort of add this tension, and there's this people running around and this stuff happening. But I found myself being more excited, like just physically excited watching this episode than I did the previous 3 of this season. It was just something about the way, I don't know if it was the way it was directed, the script itself, the performances, whatever combination of those things. It was like, as each scene ended in this and just went to that, it was like, it felt like it had this very snappy pace where everything was just very well put together. And as bleak as it was, it still had an excitement to it. And that, to me, is the best thing about it, is that when watching it again, when I've obviously seen it several times now, I was still just as into it, and just, following the, the roller coaster ride of the episode.
what I think it might,
seeing it for the first time.
what I think it might be is that when we get these stories involving Mahoney, there's a sense of events being one step ahead of the detectives, that they sort of like having to play catch up, that things are unfolding, that they're like forces of antagonism that are harder for them to like fight. They're not dealing with stupid criminals. There's there's more of a challenge for them, and
Right.
you're also thinking what's going to happen next. So it's like the stakes are a little bit higher because they've got a good villain, someone who's smart, someone who's resourceful.
Yeah, don't forget to move the pictures along a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think the sort of recurring thing in David Simon's writing is that he writes a lot about how basically the war on drugs has a kind of bleak, hopeless feel for the side of law enforcement, in terms of basically thinking no matter what they do to fight drugs, that it's a losing battle, that there's always, it continues regardless of what they do. There's no like real winning when it comes to drugs. So that kind of element obviously permeates through what you said, because there's this feeling like the cops are just sort of going through the motions of stuff they know isn't going to really change anything or help anybody. It's just going to be like a temporary fix to a problem that's larger than anything they can do anything about.
I wonder if it looks like Munch may have actually been having a little drink there on the scene of a crime.
Yeah, I think they did that to sort of make it appear as if he wasn't working, he was having a date or something, and then you pan back and see the guy on the table, and no, he just came upon the scene and decided to help himself.
I think I took this one 2 or 3 times because I think I might use this as the. Yeah,
that's a nice...
I might use that as the thumbnail.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one. This almost feel like this one is another one you do a split screen of and have like this, and then Luther Mahoney on the other side.
Yes, that's a good point, Jeff. I think
given a smug smile on his face.
Yeah, how important he is as well. Yes, I think I'll try and. Very good lighting. As I was saying, Mahoney have these on, but the other guy was like trying to, and of course this guy we know as the Danvers. Is it Danvers?
Yep, yes, yep. Danvers, and that first name of the actor is pronounced Jelko.
Yep, Jelko. That makes sense.
Somebody wanted to
know. Yes, Munch was written well in this episode.
Yeah, he got some good lines, got some things to do.
It was back to authentic Munch, and like just bring in Bolander even when Bolander's not there.
Bolander got a couple of mentions in this episode, and even Felton got mentioned.
Yeah, but they don't get the residuals, though, do they, for being mentioned?
No, I don't think so, because they didn't create the character, so
No.
the name doesn't give them anything.
But you know, they're both of those guys will be doing fine. Right. Okay. Of course, I know who Walt McPherson is now. He is the SJ guy. Who this guy here
Captain Gaffney. Yep.
with about the most. Is that the most STJ haircut you could have there, Jeff?
I don't know. That one's almost starting to look like an '80s new wave band haircut. Yeah. He's almost crossing the line with that one.
In fact, actually, the STJs might say, "No, that's too long."
Yeah, I'd say he needs a haircut. Yeah.
Yes. So that's not SJ enough, not STJ enough. And again, this actor's so good, Yaphet Kotto, and I highly suggest. And what we could do, Jeff, I am open to watching Live and Let Die and reviewing it with you, just so that we can review Yaphet Kotto's performance as the baddie in Live and Let Die, because that's a good Bond film.
I'm open to doing that if we increase our pace on the homicides as well.
Well, the pace
because then we could do it as a change of pace, in like a weekend, not do it in place of homicide, but maybe a weekend where if we were doing like 2 homicides a week, then maybe 1 week we just do one and then the movie, something like that.
Oh no, I think maybe a special occasion we could do 2, but I am doing. I mean, it's not like lately, I think in December I only did 1 Only Fools and Horses with Haley, and maybe 2 Red Dwarfs.
I'm not trying to monopolize your life, then.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying that in terms of reviews, it actually balances out. So it's like 4 reviews with you a month and 4 reviews with Haley a month.
I noticed from your playlists on your channel that we're almost. I think it's 4. We still have 4 more Blake 7 videos on your channel than Homicide, so we're almost caught up.
Yeah, we're almost caught up.
Yeah. And of course, we can still do. We still got audio Blake 7s that we haven't done also. So.
Yeah, but I think with. I think we did counterfeit though. It's just that those ones would require being purchased. The audio Blake 7s are quite pricey.
Well, anyway.
But you did say you once had some coupons for that. Yeah. Yeah, the only bit I thought was a little bit was, is Lewis the sort of person to go into a room and say, "Oh, I'm going to smack the person that"?
Yeah, under those circumstances, I didn't find that to be unbelievable in any way. It does seem like something he would say.
I just thought, oh, that's a bit aggressive. But,
Yeah, well, Lewis is more likely to say it than actually do it.
Yeah.
Whereas Kellerman might be likely to actually go into the room and actually smack somebody. Yeah. Before saying he was going to do it. Whereas Lewis is saying it.
This is good Richard Belzer looking put out acting.
Mm-hmm.
Brody Levan.
And we have another appearance of that department union lawyer. As some may remember, she was Lewis's lawyer when he got into a driving mishap.
Right. Now, this is something that I've noticed before in Homicide, where they'll have the camera canted, and as the door opens, it will sort of like go, so you can see how it cants. Oh, right, so there it's going, and then as they move across. And then I got these out of sequence because I just wanted to show the audience that they've got this guy, like I said, initially he's got the sugar addiction because, as a sort of substitute for the heroin. Oh, right. Yeah, because I think I've put MBTI in the title. So in terms of MBTI, I don't know if you've noticed that SJs can have these weird interests, Jeff, in terms of the things that they like, where it's like a little bit of weird NE kind of thing going on.
I'm not sure what you're referring to specifically.
Well, he has interest in cartoons and stuff. And
I don't know how that qualifies as any.
Well, anything that seems...
It just seems more childish than anything else.
Yeah, childish and sort of absurdist. Absurd.
But it seems. I say I don't think it seems absurd to me. It just seems. It's like very traditional seeming, which fits.
Right. Okay.
You know, is that rather than the contrast is, Brody tries to get him to watch some documentary about a filmmaker that's all avant-garde or whatever. And
yeah.
Bayless listens to the description, and it's like he says something about Brody says the guy shoots. He does some of his filmmaking without filming the camera, and Bayless responds to that, the absurdity of that, like you know, we're gonna watch the thing I know, which is Mighty Mouse.
Yeah. You never know.
It was a very
When I saw,
could see Bolander having a similar reaction to. He probably wouldn't watch Mighty Mouse, but he might watch like Matlock or something, or
Matlock,
or you know, Andy Griffith's Show or something like that, and under the same circumstances, he'd probably give Brody a similar look and be like, "No, we're going to watch this."
In fact, I remember a Simpsons joke about all the old people had to get home because it was time for Matlock and Murder, She Wrote on CBS. Which is very big. Now, when I was watching this, I was thinking, up against the wall, shell suits. Right.
In fact, there was another part when in the squad room when they pretended they were talking about football when they'd really been talking about Kellerman.
Yeah.
Where they talked about the Ravens, and that was one of those times that we missed having Bolander there to say it wasn't the real football because it wasn't the Colts.
Yeah, it wasn't the
traditional
Colts,
team,
the proper Colts.
Yeah.
Now this actress here, she looks a little bit like Bambera in Battlefield. In the, I think Battlefield was the final season of proper Doctor Who.
Okay, no spoilers because I haven't seen that one. So.
Yeah, well, she was also in the final episode of series 2 of Red Dwarf, playing the female version of Dave Lister.
So what did you think of the character of Stivers from this episode?
She was okay. She was okay.
I was telling Morgan earlier that seeing her introduction again, and again I'll say this when there's little spoilers as possible, it made me think they started her off as a character better than she finished. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, like her first scene, you're thinking, oh, is she an STP? And then I'm
actually glad that Morgan isn't here to comment on that because he would have a strong reaction to disown her as being an STP because of things that happen later.
Yeah,
but he's not, so I'll just leave it at that.
Right.
Luther Mahoney.
I'm not too sure about this actor and the way he plays the part. Then you've got.
I loved the fact that they didn't have Pembleton pass the exam the first time, because that's another one of those things. I feel like there are a lot of shows that they would have had that happen. It's like, oh, we've had our big ratings from the stroke episodes, and now it's time to get back to normal. And Homicide, once again, going for more realism, says, no, Frank would not be ready yet. And so he fails, and not because even of the thing that, of the firing, the weapon exactly, but because something in his brain doesn't quite comprehend a word correctly when he's supposed to do something. And so it's another time where they focus on, the details of the effects of a stroke as opposed to just sort of glossing over it like, well, it's just sort of an illness he has for a short time. They really make a point of showing that it's something that may linger with him. forever.
What I might have done, or what I would have discussed in the writers' room, would been the idea of, because he hasn't taken his medicine, that he does have another stroke.
Well, I'm sure it probably was discussed.
Mm.
Exactly how far they were going to take things. And again, that's something where the network obviously was privy to all the discussions too, in terms of they had their say in terms of what was going to be done with the character.
But if they had have done that, he would have been out of action even more than what he is. So
right, and obviously they did. He already was sort of the breakout star of the show, and they didn't want to lose him. They wanted him to be featured as much as possible and still maintain the integrity of the show.
Mm.
So the network actually will probably, and I say really probably, they more than probably were sort of pressuring them to get him back to normal faster. Because, this has been now, we're only 4 episodes into the season, but that might be the longest stretch of the show since it started where we haven't had a Pimbleton in the box scene. It usually at least every couple of episodes you can count on having that, and then it hadn't been to this point, and wouldn't be for a while longer. So some people, some network people are getting a little nervous, like the reason some people are tuning in is not there.
Yeah.
So having Andre Braugher get plenty of opportunities to have meaty acting scenes doing other stuff, which is what he requested, because he actually had considered leaving the show after the previous season, and they talked him into staying basically by they were going to do this story that he would be able to do something different.
Of course, that may have just been a tactic by the agent to get more money, but that might be some.
It's possible, but it's like everybody has a price. But the thing is that I don't think, under these circumstances, that anybody who was working for Homicide was under the delusion that they were going to get a huge pay increase, because the show was always on the verge of cancellation itself. So there wasn't anybody that was going to be pulling any George Clooney stunts for money per episode, because they knew that the show itself was not on great ground.
It weren't like Seinfeld or Everybody Loves Raymond, where Brad Garrett could hold out for more cash.
Right. Yeah. Even Ned Beatty, who was not too surprisingly, the highest paid member of the cast when they started, he wasn't under the delusion that he was going to get some big pay increase, and that's not why he left the show. At least, according to anybody that talked to, nobody claims that he made any kind of demands for a lot more money, including him.
Yeah, but how old was he though when he left? I mean, he was probably over 60, wasn't he?
No, I don't think he was that old. I think he was somewhere around 50, probably, maybe a little over that. I don't remember.
All right. But yeah, I mean, it's a good episode. What about in terms of typology? Anything spring to mind, Jeff, for this episode?
Well, I would say again, it's with Stivers, just based on this episode, we would get a first impression of a utilitarian type,
right,
and probably an artisan type, because she does have a certain audacity to her, both in her technique as a cop, but also in what she says to Lewis. And I'm not trying to make, I would never try to say that a guardian or an idealist could not proposition a married man, because obviously they can and do. But obviously that does lean us more in a direction of somebody who is not quite as traditional or cooperative in terms of with recognized institutions. This is when she hears, all she has to hear is he is quote unquote working on his marriage to decide to make a bit of a move on him. So.
Yeah, but you see, marriage as an institution has changed a lot in terms of the divorce rate, and in particular areas in America, it's like, well, yeah, they're married, but for how long?
True.
Or
Now, of course,
like,
this was 20 years ago, almost. Well, I
but
guess it actually was a little more than 20 years ago now.
but even then, the divorce rate was something like maybe
Yeah,
1 in 3, and now it's like 1 in 2 or something.
Right. I'm not trying to say that it was some kind of ancient time in the past or whatever, but it was still considered a bold move for even a man, but especially a woman, to make that kind of proposition just based on hearing somebody is working on their marriage. So
Yeah, but I think women have greater latitude to make those kind of comments.
I don't know how to respond to that because I don't know what you mean by having a latitude.
More able to get away with making comments like that.
Get away with in what sense, though? In terms of the other person being offended, or society, or what?
Just less offended, I think, because it's just like, oh, this is just a woman, a cheeky woman, a woman with spirit.
It's interesting to think about. You could speculate how different other characters would have responded to the same thing should she have done that. Like if it had been Frank, for instance, instead of Meldrick. He might have had a grin on his face, but still say something to the effect that he was happily married and not interested.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't actually say that.
Yeah, because we know that Lewis isn't actually happily married. Whereas I think someone like Frank actually may be a bit more offended by that.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether he would be offended, but I think he would feel the need to say something to make it clear that he's nipping it in the bud right there.
Yeah. Because we know that Frank's marriage is pretty solid.
Yeah. And obviously, I feel like Bayless would have too if he was married, but he's not. So, obviously it's a different dynamic there.
To me, it's not whether they're married or not. It's how solid the marriage is that determines.
We've already had some exploration of that up to this point in Homicide, and there will be more as the show continues with other characters and their relationships and marriages.
And also, it depends how we interpret how it was said. Like with how much.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, with the way to me that Stivers says the line at the bar.
Yeah.
That didn't actually come off to me very flirty. It seemed like a very practical, matter-of-fact statement.
Yeah.
It really just sort of seemed like, yeah, okay, you're married now, but if that changes, look me up. Kind of, she was just floating it out there.
Yeah, because he said
because
he did say working on his marriage.
Right. As opposed to something where she was really making a move to try to like get him in bed that night or something. It's more of she's planting the seed kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that was perfectly acceptable.
Yeah. So, any thoughts on Kellerman's storyline with?
Right. Well,
I mean, if you want to go another direction, that's fine too. I just figured we hadn't talked much about that, so. If you had any comments on.
Well, there's no real right. I think the actor played it well. He's still playing. Not really, except that it shows that there's larger things at work, and that's good. It's sort of like referring to a world outside of the things that we can actually see. And as you know from seeing quite a few players, that's good when you can like talk about things outside of what we see to sort of like make the world seem a bit bigger.
Yeah. I can kind of see Mr. Morris's dilemma when it comes to writing reviews but not spoiling future stuff, because it's hard for me to comment on some of the stuff that's introduced in this episode without thinking, what happens down the line. And so it really does change sort of the way I perceive it now, knowing what I do about, how everything turns out. So it makes it difficult for me to think about what my fresh perspective was on it when I first saw it, because I don't remember.
Yeah, I mean, that aspect with Conan is not really a big apart from the fact that, like, the scene when he was talking to G about it.
I would say, though, that the one thing I can say is that it seemed like when you're already in a situation where you're down detectives, which was necessitated first by actors leaving the show, but then also having a character have a stroke and you have to deal with that. I didn't quite understand why, narrative-wise, they wanted to do something that took another detective out of the rotation, unless it was to feature more of the regular people that they hadn't been, like Munch and Howard, but they really weren't. Instead, we get a lot of stuff with Stivers, a new character. And so if that was network interference saying, okay, we want a character to get some more action, because I know that happened at times with the show. And because I guess they thought with Mahoney they had something that would drag people in, bring people in as viewers as well, with that storyline. So I don't know, but that one to me puzzles me a little bit why they wanted to do that. But what do you have any thoughts on Mahoney as a character or as a type from what you've seen of him so far?
Not as a type. I like him as a character. It's good to have a smart villain. Maybe they had that thing in here where he had that little slip. It wasn't a massive slip, but maybe I wouldn't have written him making that slip.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because here's the thing that's left up to interpretation, and even in the comments I heard him say behind the scenes, David Simon, about this character and about this scene. There's still one thing that I don't quite get, and I think he may have mentioned it, I don't remember for sure, because it's been a while since I saw the DVD extras on this. But you called it a slip, and so I found myself almost wondering whether it was sort of a double bluff in terms of, did he do that on purpose to sort of make it sound like he was giving himself up, but he really wasn't. It was just sort of a make the detectives think they have something, but then I know the whole time they're not going to be able to. Is he that confident that that he's actually taunting them with that, or did he really just forget? Because it seems like he would be unlikely. We're not talking, Pimbleton making a scene or any of the other, really strong interrogation tactics. We just had, and maybe that's the strength of Lewis, is he has that kind of very casual presentation that maybe he does sort of lull somebody into a false sense of security and they do slip up for that reason. So you could kind of see it either way. Maybe he really did because he just sort of was so casual about it that he wasn't thinking, he wasn't really thinking about what he needed to stick to in his story.
Well,
or
we also know,
it could be either
way.
Yeah,
we also know that he's smart, but he's also a little bit arrogant.
Right.
And so it is believable that he can slip up.
And that's where we have,
in certain ways,
a thing where I would say that, again, we have a character that I would say comes off as a pragmatist or utilitarian type, but not sure about Artist and Irrational, because you don't know yet whether or not he's more tactical or strategic. When it comes to his thinking, is he thinking more long term, or is he just reacting in the moment to what happens? And those can sometimes appear the same because, of course, the more experienced a tactician is, the more they can appear to be strategic to other people because they have that experience that prepares them for things that come at them, as opposed to really having a long-term plan. They can just come off as if they're well prepared because they have a lot of experience.
Yeah. He knows his trade.
Yeah. He's obviously dealt plenty with the police before, But for whatever reason, it's pretty recent that he's really come into contact with homicide, because before it was probably narcotics and drug type cops that he was dealing with most of the time. And it was only in the previous season when you had people started getting into a war where he got involved with homicide cops. So you talked earlier about the challenge. This is sort of it's kind of the next challenge for him. It's like he's risen to the new level of in the criminal world, as now he's facing off with homicide cops. He even said himself in their first meeting with them, the best and the brightest. Like he made it, kind of did a sort of a mock kind of respect to him, like, oh, I'm dealing with the big time now.
You see, maybe an SP would like to do that kind of like outwitting more than a rational. I don't know which type would enjoy it more. Which temperament would enjoy that more?
Yeah, it's tough to say, because I could see either one for different reasons. If he feels like, I think I would say from my experience, it would seem like the difference would be that for a rational, that if they approach this, that there was something that they could learn specifically from this to raise their game in whatever way, they were trying to do it.
Yeah.
That would be beneficial, whereas an artisan would simply would get off from the experience itself of just outfoxing the cops again.
This might be one of these things where if this scene was in a novel, you'd like get different layers to it, and you could like really you could like do more inside Mahoney's head.
And that's always the two sides of that, because in a novel, people talk about the reader can use their imagination more than when you're watching a television or a movie where everything is shown to you. But you also, when you do it visually and you don't have an internal monologue that you can hear, then the audience has that opportunity for that to be the imagination area, where because they don't hear what the person is thinking or any kind of extra stuff about that, the details of what you aren't seeing and hearing. So it's up to the audience's interpretation.
Well, it also depends how good the acting is. I mean, if you got really good acting,
and some of the best things about this episode are in things that weren't said. Facial expressions, looks. I mean, you mentioned Munch.
Yeah.
In his look. First to Brody and then to Bayless, some of Pembleton's looks, Pembleton and his wife.
Yeah.
Of course, that helps that they're married in real life, but you see, she asks him a question, but she doesn't listen to his answer. She watches his answer.
Yeah.
To know that he's lying. So there's several instances in this episode alone where you see acting where it's visual acting, not audio, where they don't say anything. It's all in the way they look.
Yeah, I think I may have
Keely Prince played Vernon Troy. I first saw him on All My Children as Terrence. He was, in the great shallowness of the acting business, he was replaced as Terrence, from what I understand, mainly because he was too short. Because his romantic co-star that they were pairing him up with was taller than him, so they got a taller dude who wasn't as good an actor. Meanwhile, this guy went on to do some better acting on some other things, like this.
They could have just given him lifts if that was important, or put him on a box.
Yeah, well, that's show business for you.
And people justifying their positions and ego.
This might have been the most seriously authoritative that Gaffney ever came off, at least to this point on the show. Because in some ways he was sort of written to be the incompetent boss type.
Yeah.
Somebody that anybody respected. And in this, if you just saw this scene and knew nothing about the character previously, you would fully believe him as being a respected authority figure. So.
Yeah, it's like I said, when they first introduced him as a character, I thought he was written badly. That they should have written him as a little bit more intelligent. And
Well, it's
obviously,
obvious that Walt McPherson is able to rise to the challenge of presenting him in a different light.
yeah, because when he was first presented, he was presented as this lazy guy,
Yeah.
and
It really seems to me from something like this that you see that he's better suited for a role like this, for an authority role, than he was as a detective, because it really sort of in the way he was presented, like he wasn't really that great a detective, because he was a little bit sloppy, not necessarily a hard worker, or at least not all the time. But in this kind of role, he doesn't have to do a lot of that detail work to, be an authority figure and bark orders at people, and he can do that.
yeah, especially if it's an ASTJ, then second nature or first nature.
And Barnfather actually takes a little bit more of the diplomatic role as the colonel, in terms of he's always thinking about the PR aspect of stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas as the captain, he's not necessarily having to deal with that as much.
Yeah. Don't know if I can find a grab of Pemberton with his wife.
I thought you had one that I saw earlier, but maybe not. Maybe it was
maybe I have. Well, that's still at the beginning. That's because that's we've got. Oh yeah, that's where them. Yeah, I've got them holding hands. I thought it was a nice touch, them holding hands.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it would have been at the end of that scene where she was, looking at him to see if he's lying.
Yeah, I really liked that scene because there was that subtle acting between the two where you don't even see his face. You see her face reading his face,
Yeah.
and seeing that he's lying. Because when he says, of course, then, like I said, she doesn't listen. She's looking at him when she repeats the question to see how is he going to respond physically. And he obviously shows that, though he may be a good liar when he's performing for people that don't know him, he's not good at lying to his wife.
Yeah. I know, yeah, but it's not just so much that is like he doesn't want to lie to his wife.
Yeah, right. That's
so
part
the
of it.
fact, yeah, that's gonna.
You could argue what percentage is is ability and what's intent, but he very quickly, it stops himself from even trying to pretend with her.
Yeah, because as he was doing it, he'd be feeling bad for trying to lie to his wife, and that his conscience in that would stop him from doing it well. Whereas if it's to someone he doesn't mind lying to, then no worries.
Yeah, right. Because this is even in his role as a performer type. There are times at which, he's not in that zone of performance. He's in a different. And when he's talking to his wife about this, he's not comfortable, not in his element. Yeah, so we had, a few episodes ago ending with him tossing out the medication, and then this one ends, of course, with him taking it again. But I love the scene with him and G too, because again, you saw the continued conflict and yet respect that comes between those two, in terms of they're both pained by this. G doesn't want for this to drag out. He wants Frank to be back, but he realizes he can't be, and it hurts him too. But he can't really show that because he has to remain the authority figure that's laying down the law and saying this. He has to trying to be motivational. He's trying to say, this is what you have to do. There's nothing I can do. This is the bottom line. You meet this or you don't. And yet at the same time, he's torn up in both directions. Not just that he doesn't, from both ways, just in the business standpoint of being a boss and being short this detective who's, one of, if not his best detective, or has been in the past. And the personal aspect of it, and being torn up by what's happening to Frank and what has happened to him, and all of those elements again go into the character's behavior. So
what I would have liked is like a little G story at this point, a little bit more.
Yeah, I think they just probably had a little too much packed into this episode that there wasn't time for a G story. There will be more though. He's not told his last story, that's for sure.
I like that. I like his SJ moments, like telling a story. Yeah. That.
Well, and I would say, in this you see SJ moments, but it's like I said, it's a different side of that. It's
yeah.
We're not having the storytelling side in this one. We're seeing the authority figure, but not and not in the aggressive, in your face way, but just in the bottom line firm way of presenting the situation, reminding Frank that there is nothing that I can do to bend this. It's one way or the other.
Yeah.
And he doesn't say, I hope you make it, because I think he feels motivationally that it's better for him to present it as it's up to you, to Frank, as opposed to saying that he's rooting for him or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yes, and there was that bit. And there was actually a bit where there was an interesting bit where G actually pressed one of his buttons by saying, "You're part of the problem," in like the way you're dealing with this. Towards the end, didn't he? What did you think about that?
He says, "I expected more from you," because
that bit.
Yeah, he throws it back at him, and again, that's something where. I view it as probably it's a motivational tactic more than anything else.
Yeah.
That it's not even as much he's hurt by what Frank says, though he might be a little bit, but it's more like he's viewing it as, I can't really let on that I'm feeling bad for him. I have to present this as it's still the challenge he's got to meet, because he's so close that he just needs to get over that hump. And I've got to get him there by presenting this solid front as opposed to any kind of compromise attitude.
So let's get the line. So what did he say? I expected more from you.
Yeah, I believe that's what he said. Yeah.
Right. Now I imagine that ESTJs have said that line a lot, and they expect that from everyone.
Yeah, and Frank says it first.
Yeah.
So he throws back the exact same line back at him.
You know what I mean? Because the ESTJs are so much about self-discipline.
Yeah.
They're pretty much thinking that about a lot of people. I expected more.
Oh yeah, and they still will expect it, no matter how many times that they're shown not to.
Yes, they expect
it. As I've said many times before, experienced, older, intelligent guardians still tend to hold this core belief that everybody can be good guardians if they just have enough training or discipline or rehabilitation or whatever it is they feel like needs to be done. That somehow, and if they can't, it's because the parents didn't raise them right, or they weren't trained properly, or there's always a deficiency, a malfunction. It can't be that person just is never going to be that.
Yeah, because they don't see it as guardian temperament. They see it as discipline, self-discipline. And if you're not going to discipline yourself, I will instill it in you. Yeah,
it's good or bad. It's it's cut and dry, black or white. It's you either do this or you don't. And you see that from G quite a bit, over the course of the show. He has the times where he starts waxing, telling the old stories, but he also has plenty of times where it's just close the case, close the case, close the case, close the case.
But as you know, I mean, functionally, I have a little bit of SJ in me. I have some little SJ moments myself.
Well, I hear there's medication for that now. I'm just kidding.
But I can give you an example. They took these. I remember seeing a program where they took these young offenders from South Wales, and so juvenile delinquents, and they took them to Romania to see like proper poverty, and it did actually have an effect on them, and sort of gave them a dose of perspective, and to sort of like moderate their SP behavior. So there are things that can be done to moderate people by giving them things. There is a nurture element to things, as I'm sure you would acknowledge. But of course, that can only go so far. But I think that a lot of people are in the middle, where what I mean by that is there are some people who are born in the most terrible of circumstances, but through their own character, their own nature being the way it is, they're able to get through it. And you can have people born in the best of circumstances, but the way their nature is, they're not able to take advantage of all of these opportunities that have been handed to them on a plate. They're not able to take. So if you just looked at that, you would say, "Oh, nature's more important than nurture." But I would say for a lot of people are in the middle, and nurture is important for them.
Yeah, I would never pretend to know that I could state a percentage, and I think it does depend on the person. It depends on a lot of factors. Like, there's just too much to that for me to, to say any kind of percentages one way or the other, because it's so hard to test that, to have, because you can't have the same person live multiple lives to demonstrate how they react differently to different circumstances. All you can do is guess based on the reactions of similar people, but they're not the same person, so you can't ever know completely for sure.
But and also we can look at how people have changed through life experience.
Right. And so you can look at patterns in terms of the way people behave. It's one of the reasons I had such a I made some of my best grades in my brief stint in college in this subject of sociology. In fact, my very best grade, the only 100 I ever made on a final exam in college was in sociology. But I hated it. I had this love-hate thing with it because I know the material is not hard to learn because it's basically the study of stereotypes. But it bothers me the way it's presented as this is just how people are, when I think I see so many of the different factors. Actually, Celebach did a video recently he uploaded about how they had done a study that said people have more fun on trips or vacations or things like that, or just leisure time in general, when they do it spontaneously and they don't plan too much. And so he did a video talking about how it was funny to see a study like that, when he basically said it was a waste of time and money to do this study, because he could have said that it depends on the temperament of the person.
Yes, I was about to say it depends on because the sort of person that doesn't is the sort of person that likes fun anyway.
Right. That's the thing, is that you're always, because of the fact that Guardians are the majority, but Artisans are a solid plurality, I guess would be a way to put it, in terms of the second largest group.
Yeah.
Is that there's always going to be enough of us to factor into those studies. And when you have, I know from experience talking to as many Guardians as I have, is that they will say things like, I enjoy being spontaneous. But then when you really break down what they do, they still plan to the spontaneity.
Yeah, I mean, that's just spontaneous for them, for a Guardian.
Right. Yeah, and they're not going to have fun if they feel like they just jumped into something without any prior planning. That's not fun for Guardians. They have to feel like they at least know what they're getting into to some extent. But the thing is that even what's fun is different to different temperaments, because Guardians can, to a certain extent, they enjoy when things aren't exactly going to plan, because they feel, they have to do they're preparing for calamity is one thing that they're good at doing usually. And so part of it is they have to think about all these things that could go wrong and will go wrong.
Yeah, and then they can And they can use it as leverage over other people. See, I was right.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's a thing to be able, be like, well, if we had only prepared better for this, if we'd only stuck to this plan better, or if we, saw, did this ahead of time, if everyone had just listened to me, that kind of stuff. So yeah.
So they have that. Yeah, it's tricky. And as we know, it's
I guess.
Yeah, your sound is cut out, Jeff.
Oh, I stopped because I thought you were finishing a point, but if you're not, I was just going to say we probably ought to wrap it up here.
We've pretty much finished
so I
up
guess
the.
We'll go to the ratings.
Yes, okay. I will give this. What did I give the last one? Did I give the last one 8?
Let's see. That was Prison Riot. You actually gave that a 9. I gave it an 8. You gave it a 9.
I don't know what I'd give this one. Prison Riot. What happened? Do you know, I've completely forgotten about what happened in Prison Riot, about why I gave it a 9.
Well, you said the acting was really good, including.
Oh yes, Dutton. Yes, right.
And,
yes.
You liked the dynamics of the detectives with the prisoners and Bayless, and I forgot all. I mean, you can go back and watch it if you want to know everything you said. But
although the SJ in me is not happy with an ex-convict being on television.
I think ex-convicts should be banned from television.
Yeah. I'm not happy with that.
He's done his time, and his profession is acting. So there you go.
Well, yeah, but did he do enough time? I mean, the SJ in me is thinking, did he do 30 years?
But no, I believe it was 7 years. But
7 years? What was the 7 years for?
Well, you can go look up the details if you really want to know. But I can tell you that since he's been out, he's done an awful lot of charity work and attempts to help his community avoid getting into the trouble he did. So.
Well, that's good SJ points. That's SJ points there.
There you go.
Stuff for the community.
Right.
I'll give this one. I think I'll give this one an 8.
And I will give it a 9.
Ooh.
I almost gave it a 10, but the only thing that keeps me from doing that, because it is an exciting episode, is the elements I mentioned, the story choices, which I can't, I don't know how much to blame on the network and how much to blame on the Homicide producers, but the choices of what they did to Kellerman and bringing in a new character of Stivers as opposed to featuring Howard or Munch in any real significant role. I disagree with those story choices, so that's the only thing that keeps me from giving it a 10. So that's why.
Do you think the network just decided that the people don't really like Howard and Munch?
Well, obviously at some point they decided people liked Munch because they kept him going for years and years, even beyond Homicide. So, but at this point, maybe so. I don't know. It's possible that their, testing or whatever at that point showed that he wasn't a popular character. I think some of it was that Andre Braugher was very popular and they tried to feature him as much as possible, and that the other pressure they were getting from the network was feature new and more attractive people with sex appeal, whatever. And trying to sort of play up that part. So I know there was a lot of interference, but yeah, I know there was always a divide, I think, when it comes to Howard especially, and maybe some of Munch too, in terms of the loyal viewers that were real Homicide fans liked Howard and wanted to see more of her, but there were probably the casual viewers, maybe not as much.
Yeah, and some of those loyal fans, I bet some of them may have typed up some of the episodes. And there may be some scenes we could go through in the future. If there are any particular scenes that, like, say there's a scene of, say a certain scene in the box where we could sort of like go through it, if we wanted to, if there was a particularly good scene that we wanted to look at.
I'm not sure what you mean now. You lost me.
Well, like, I could like show this. Say somebody has transcribed an episode, and there's a particular scene that you would like to look at in depth, like look at the script, look at the script. Like,
I don't know that anybody has transcribed any episodes, but I can find out.
I think, there's a lot, because it is one of those shows that I believe would have like a loyal fan base, and of course
it does, but I don't know whether anyone's done that.
and when people are that loyal, there are some people who want to type it up. There are loyal people who can also type. They want to show their skills.
When you said type it up, I wasn't sure exactly what you were referring to.
Ah, right, yeah.
Type the script up.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. Well, join us next time for an episode titled "Me, Myself, and I," which introduces yet another new character, another female character.
Ooh.
A female artisan character.
Ooh.
So we'll see how that goes.
Right. Okay. Okay. Bye, folks. Hope she's hot.
Bye.
Or was hot 20 years ago. All right. Bye.